Looking at live shots, folks are still voting in New Hampshire. Looking at live pictures from Nashua right now. But let's get our first clues right now as to how this night might unfold. We're getting the first results from our exit polls. David Chalian is looking at those numbers, getting some indication where we all might be heading, David.
Wolf, we can't stress enough how much this Democratic primary electorate really dislikes Donald Trump and really wants to find the candidate who can defeat him. Take a look. We've asked this question all election season long. New Hampshire Democratic primary voters in these early exit polls, and these numbers will change throughout the night, but this is what they told us as they were leaving the polls. Are you looking for someone who agrees with you on the issues? 34% said that. But 62%, an overwhelming majority of Democrats said what they're looking for is somebody who can defeat Donald Trump. Take a look at their feelings about the president. Again, these are Democratic primary voters, so you'd expect them to not have great feelings about the president. But look at this number. 81% of Democratic primary voters today in New Hampshire say they are angry about the Trump administration. Anger is a motivating factor for folks to get to the polls. That is a huge number. And finally, we asked folks, what about impeachment? Do you think that has helped or hurt Donald Trump's chances at re-election? 15% say help those chances. 22% say hurt them. But the vast majority, 59%, of these Democratic primary voters today said they don't think the impeachment matter is going to make any difference in Donald Trump's re-election chances come November, Wolf.
Very significant indications. All right, David, thanks very much. Let's go back to Jake and Dana. 81% of these Democrats who are voting based on our exit polls are angry right now at the Trump administration.
Angry, and then also 62% say the most important factor is whether or not the Democratic candidate can beat Trump, as opposed to 34% saying the most important factor is agrees with you. And this, Dana, is what we've been hearing from all these candidates is their theory of the case, why they have the best chance to defeat Donald Trump.
Yep.
You have Bernie Sanders saying, I can motivate all these working class voters, young people, this new coalition, get them to the polls and flood the zone, of all these of voting booths and have people turn out to defeat Trump. Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, a different message, and Joe Biden too, saying I can bring in moderate voters, I can bring in independents. So this is the debate that they're having.
And I cannot tell you how many stressed out New Hampshire Democratic voters I met over the past several days, back to when I was there last week, for this very reason, because they are so angry, because they so desperately want Donald Trump to be replaced. And they understand, I mean, they always understand in New Hampshire how important their vote is. But unlike never before in their lifetimes, do they feel that they have such a responsibility for helping find the person who can help kind of dissipate the anger and replace Donald Trump. I mean, I've been texting with some of the voters I met who are undecided today, and they're telling me about how, frankly, emotional it was for them to finally make a decision in the voting booth today for that reason, because of all of the emotion and anger and frustration that was expressed in these polls that David showed us.
And David has more exit poll results. David?
That's right, Jake. One of the things, as Dan is talking about the stressed out voters, I think that's part of the reason why we saw some paralysis at the end among New Hampshire voters as to making up their mind. Take a look. We asked when people made up their mind, made their decision today. If you look at these top two, just today, 16%. In the last few days, 32%. That's nearly half the primary electorate saying they just made up their mind within the last few days. That's an enormous swath of the electorate. 14% said earlier this month, 6% said last month in January, and only about 3 in 10 said they made up their mind before that, meaning last year. Bernie Sanders has very sticky supporters. I'm sure he would like to see that number even more, that people went to him, locked in with him early. I also want to show you about the last debate that happened on Friday night. You remember that debate? How important of a factor was that in your decision? We asked voters today. 48%, nearly half the electorate today, says that debate was an important factor in their decision. 44% said not an important factor, but that 48% is a big number. That debate probably mattered quite a bit to the overall outcome that we're going to see tonight. We also took a look, Jake, at first-time voters. We know Bernie Sanders particularly talks about trying to expand the electorate, bring people in that haven't voted before, especially young people that haven't voted before. Only 12%. According to these early exit polls, and I anticipate these numbers are going to change throughout the evening, as folks were leaving the polling places, 12% told us they were a first-time voter. That's a little lower than the 16% that said so back in 2016. We'll see if that number changes throughout the night. And finally, we wanted to look at undeclared voters. That's what they're officially called in New Hampshire. If they are not registered with Republicans and Democrats, as you know, they can choose either primary. Take a look at this. 43% of the electorate were registered as undeclared. These independents, these are going to be huge. This is about what it was in 2016, and Bernie Sanders did so well with them. He's going to count on these to have a good night tonight as well. We'll see how they turned out as the vote comes in. Anderson, back to you.
David Chalian, thanks very much. Back now with our panel. But, Corey, interesting that so many of the voters seem to have just made up their mind.
Yeah, that's kind of fascinating to watch, I think, because we all live in this bubble in Washington, D.C. We're like, we know what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. But a lot of people are still getting the feeling for the candidate, which is why, the governor said it best, and so did Chris, that Iowa mattered coming in because you have that momentum. You have to think that people making their decisions late, that benefits Mayor Pete.
But as Governor Kasich said, when you work, if you're a politician campaigning in New Hampshire, what were you saying? You've met them 5 times. They want to meet you another 3 times.
Yeah, and look, I think Anderson I think people, Jennifer and I were just talking, that people make decisions in New Hampshire later because they're going to these town halls all the time. And they go to this one, say, that's pretty good. And then they go to this one. But then somebody kind of just clicks for them. And they finally decided at the end. I love the New Hampshire primary for this reason. A lot of people say, well, why New Hampshire? I'll tell you why. Because it's a microcosm of America, except for the minority population there. But they really check you out carefully. They check you out and they analyze you. And you don't get away with anything there. You got to be real. And it's a very interesting.
From the interviews that I heard with these voters today, there was a lot of, to our previous discussion, a lot of people who were saying, you know what, I just want somebody who's going to beat Trump. I'm not sure which one it is. It'll work itself out. But they felt a huge responsibility in the mess in Iowa in trying to figure this out. And it'll be interesting. The second thing that's interesting from these exit polling is the number of first-time voters that did not increase.
That's not
I was surprised at that. I was thinking there would be more. But there have been apparently some voter suppression activity inside of New Hampshire that has been adopted since 2016, and I wonder what.
If you can tell, Democrats are extremely nervous about turnout.
Overall,
with good reason. I mean, Iowa, there was not the hordes of people turning out.
It's one of the things that I look at as somebody who wants the Democratic Party to be successful up and down the ballot is not just who wins this and who comes in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, but also how many people come out, and that number of first-time voters is really low. The number of independents that are going to play a role, and that's one of Bernie Sanders' pitch as why he's the most suitable to beat Donald Trump. Because Bernie Sanders says, and the polling shows, and states like New Hampshire show, that he does extremely well with independents. And Joe Biden's going to have to show not only the base of the party, but he has some strength there as well.
But that is one of Sanders' arguments, which is has to be a revolution. It's got to be from the bottom up. Huge numbers of people, more people, new people have to come out, have to churn in. And have to back, the sweeping changes that he wants to make. If people aren't showing up, that potentially hurts him in his argument, at least.
Yeah, but the turnout isn't just driven by one candidate, but usually, if you have a really amazing candidate, if you have a Barack Obama, we don't have a Barack Obama in this group, then they can pull out a lot more voters. So I think that it is concerning that you're not seeing more of a turnout. But in the end, Bernie Sanders just needs to win the primary, right? So regardless of how many people turn out, I do think for people of those people, around 50%, they're making up their mind last minute. Most Bernie Sanders people already knew they were voting for Bernie Sanders. Right. So those votes are probably going to someone else. And, we don't know. It could be Pete, but it could be Amy Klobuchar. We don't know. Yep. And if you're in New Hampshire also, I assume you probably wait to kind of see what happens in Iowa, right? And you factor that in as well.
I want to flag one other number that David Chalian mentioned. The question of, do you prefer a candidate who can beat Trump or agrees with you on the issue? 62%, obviously early exit polling, but 62% can beat Trump. If you told me that, not a week ago, but 2 weeks ago, I'd say, whoa, Joe Biden's going to be happy with that because his message has from the start been, you may not agree with me on everything, but I'm the guy who can beat Trump and we agree that's the common enemy, right? The fact that you have 6 in 10 people prioritizing electability over issue agreement, and you have Joe Biden either on a plane or already in South Carolina with, 2.5 more hours left in New Hampshire. I'm with Bakari that I learned the don't declare people politically dead before they are, because this is 2 votes. So I'm with them now. I don't think Joe Biden, this is the end of the road no matter what happens. I will tell you, though, that would be a concerning fact for me if I was Joe Biden and looking at that election.
We're going to take a break. Coming up, we're going to dig deeper into our exit polls. What issues matter most to New Hampshire voters? We'll find out next.